Hello, welcome back. I'm Eleanor. Thank you for coming. And this is my podcast between nasi goreng and fried rice. Hello, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming out on this very cold day. We're seated in our kitchen and we're just saying that I actually don't know you that well, even though we've sat across the table at a sort of, what do you call it, a desk, hot desk?
Hot desking, yeah.
Yeah, hot desking. And could you introduce yourself, please?
I like that you don't know me that well, yet you've invited me into your house. So first of all, I appreciate your trust. So my name's Anthony. I've got a little company called Mean Right Hook and make videos, particularly for business leaders and business owners who wants to get themselves out onto video. Video is such a huge part of communications. It's how it's evolving. We're far more likely to watch a video, even with the volume off, and watch and read the subtitles than to read a blog. So I think that's a lot of business leaders need to, just a little helping hand to get them to get to that spot. So that's what I do now.
That's cool. A little bit more, I want to sort of expand that a bit more, because I know you say you have 2 children. And when I would imagine that's very much part of your identity as a dad as well. And we not mention the location. We're in North Greenwich, and the hot desking was at the Design District next to the O2. I think I totally agree with you on the videos bit, because I'm terrible at reading, even if I have 2 degrees in literature. I don't read anymore. So I think what we want to unpack is, how has your cultural heritage, and you have an East Asian heritage, impacted on you in any way? If it has, I mean, it'd be great if you talk a bit more about that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it has to have an impact, right? I mean, so I'll give you a tour of my life. Started born, tour. Yeah, quick tour. Born in Hong Kong, raised in Canada, and now I'm here in London. And that has major impacts in my life, and how I make decisions, how I see work, how I see life, how I see friendships, right, and relationships. If you wanted to talk about first, maybe the most important thing, judging by the title of the podcast, let's talk about food. Food that has a major impact on me, because as much as I integrate with any culture that I'm in, I've done it. I've immigrated twice, in Canada and then the UK. And as much as I want to integrate into the how we eat here, I always go back to Asian food. Right, that to me is comfort. That to me is a hug. It's pretty much the last line I have, direct connection to my culture, where I can not only look at it in a book and go, hey, that's me, but I can also experience it through taste and through emotions. And so it's a big deal to me, right? I'm very protective about Chinese food and Asian food. And I think that's the reason, is because that there's a direct line to my cultural identity through that, right?
I think a lot of people would resonate with that, including me. But is there more than that? You said from Hong Kong. And I would be interested, for example, what about the music? I mean, Hong Kong music, it's not that well known. It's in the world. Although, there are some artists that are making an impact. What about when we talk culture, I'm trying to learn like Tang Dynasty poetry because I never did. I mean, being brought up in Malaysia, so we had a pretty much sort of English type education. So I knew more about Wordsworth. I knew more. I mean, I started with Wordsworth as learning about poetry than any of that. So I'm finding myself having to go back and relearn things that I might have learned had I been brought up, for example, in Hong Kong. So how old were you when you left Hong Kong?
Whew, I was, as they say, a wee lad. I was 8 years old when I moved from Hong Kong to
So
Canada.
you didn't have that much of that kind of an impact. For example, even though I was in Malaysia, I grew up with listening to Cantonese opera.
Well, mine is a little different because I find it. This is why I find the whole diaspora story so fascinating, because everybody has a different version, right? And my version, it goes something like, being in Hong Kong, I loved the city when I was growing up there. When I was a kid, right? And when I moved to Canada, and Toronto specifically, there was a strong Hong Kong Chinese community there already. Now it's not as strong as it is now, but you can find some of the food. It's not as good as it was back home.
I've been in Toronto.
Yeah.
I've eaten in Scarborough.
Yeah, the good stuff, right? It wasn't that good then when I first moved there. It was okay, but the community was there, right? And so I always felt like, even though I moved to a different country, I still had a connection to my cultural roots because of that, right? So it wasn't completely lost. You talk about music, Cantonese music. For me, I never had a major connection with it. A lot of my emotions, the language and the vocabulary of my emotions come from English. And so when I express myself, I find myself expressing in English.
Yeah.
And so, English music actually hits me harder because I can connect better with that, right? But for Cantonese music has a special part in my life because when I go karaoke with some friends, they break out a few songs. And for me, that's very nostalgic, right? I don't know the words. I know the tunes. It was just the other night where I just hummed into Shazam to try and find a song. Didn't know what the title was, but I found it, and it was soothing to hear it again. It instantly brings you back to a place where, I was younger, I had hair. And
What about Kung Fu movies, for example? Hong Kong, you can't miss that.
Kung Fu movies, I have a few movies I think that I connect with. Once Upon a Time in China with Jet Li. Yes, that is pure classics. When it comes to more modern stuff, I actually haven't kept up with it, right? So I have a friend who's actually sent me a recommendation. I still have not seen it, but I don't have as strong of a connection anymore. Maybe that's partly because I've moved now to London, where the connection to Hong Kong isn't as strong.
It's getting stronger.
Much stronger. The food's getting better too. I mean, I'm
definitely.
very happy about that. But
not in Chinatown.
Shout out to Chinatown. I feel like they've stepped up their game recently. In the last 5 years, I feel like a lot of the tourist traps have disappeared, and some of the good stuff is coming in. But yeah, it's still not as strong. And I think that because of that, I feel like I don't have that same desire to keep up with the culture. And so for me, a lot of the movies, a lot of music is nostalgic rather than stuff that's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few people. I mean, strangely enough, Eric, the North American, who's a really young guy, he's only 22, I believe, and he's in London. He has really strong kind of, seems to me, links with the sort of culture, but I think it's because his family roots are still in China, are still in Beijing. What about your parents? I mean, are they here? Are they in Canada? Are they?
Yeah, they're in Toronto, in Canada. And so is my brother. And that's my immediate family, right? So whenever we, pack up the kids, go on a holiday, Canada comes first. That to me right now sits where home is London, home is also Toronto, but I also feel more distant with my Hong Kong roots. I used to be able to call Hong Kong home, but I feel like I can't be greedy and call everywhere home, can I? So I think I can only take two places. So I think London and Toronto really take top place in my heart when I talk about home. So and the bonus for me is that because to your point, the Asian population, particularly the Chinese population in Toronto, has gotten so strong and such big influence in the city. The food is there, the music is there, the community is there. There are parts of Toronto you don't even need to speak English and get by.
But there are parts in London that I think you can get away with not speaking English. It depends where.
Yeah.
I have friends, parents who don't speak English. So, yeah. No, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just thinking, I feel like London is getting more and more diverse, and because of what's happening, because of the politics, there are more and more Hong Kong Chinese who have moved to London. And I've actually, at the O2, I've been to two prominent Canto pop artists that came because of the strength of the Hong Kong community here in London, which I think it's great, although I'm not part of the Hong Kong community because I'm not born or bred in Hong Kong. So it's kind of fascinating. I'm glad what you said about Toronto, because I've heard that of Vancouver. Well, you know what they say about Vancouver, Hongkouver, because there's so many Hong Kong folks that are there after this when Hong Kong returned back to China. But I'm still. I mean, do you think that you would go and look out for the diaspora in London? Not Hong Kong, not specifically Hong Kong, but East Asia. I only say that because I've recently kind of hooked up with that community. I mean, like you, until the last maybe 10 years of my life, I would say, I spoke in English. They say that you know what language you're in what language you dream in. I'm sure I dreamt in English. And there was, everything I did was in English. And not that I'm trying to move away, because it's not that easy, because learning Chinese and learning Cantonese is like relearning. And I say that because actually for 10 years of my life, I had to learn French. And back in my childhood, there was Malay. So, I get very confused sometimes. So what aspect of kind of London do you see now? If you see it, that you think is East Asian. I mean, have you not? I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but in where I live here in North Greenwich, I hear Cantonese all the time now on the buses, and it doesn't surprise me anymore. Whereas before, it would be like, oh, they're speaking Chinese, that kind of thing. So I don't know where I'm going. I'm kind of rambling. So
well, you're not rambling at all. I think what you're trying to see from my perspective is how London's culture has changed, and maybe through our lens as Southeast Asians. I think you're right. When I first moved here, 16, 17 years ago, I was dying for a bubble tea. You can't find bubbleology does not count, right? Sorry, I'm sorry you might have lost that sponsor in your podcast.
No, I don't have any sponsors. I sponsor
but
that.
Bubbleology is bubble tea for people who doesn't know bubble tea. And that was around, and it was sad. For me. It was hard because I came from from Toronto, where it was easy to get something authentic anywhere for a very, very affordable price. And now, let's talk Greenwich. Greenwich has
Six, I think.
yeah, in a corner of bubble tea places, and it's incredible how much this has changed in the last couple of decades. And to your point, Cantonese is spoken so frequently. Mandarin as well, but Cantonese, because I'm hypersensitive to Cantonese, I can hear it. My ears perk up and I go and I just have to have a look, right? So, and I find that it's changing the city in a way that I feel like is catching up to, I would say, early 90s Toronto, where there is a much better understanding of Asian culture, Asian food, and what we bring to the table, rather than just the stereotypical stuff like kung fu, like like Chinese takeaway, right? That was the same in Toronto in the 80s when I first moved there. It was sweet and sour chicken balls. It was General Tao's. Like, what is this stuff?
It doesn't exist.
Does not exist, right? But I also have a deeper appreciation for that food now, because the people who migrated there first needed to invent this to survive.
Yeah.
So while I have appreciation for that, what I crave that connects me to where I came from originally, that's what I was looking for, right? And I feel like we're catching up here with that, and it's just not Hong Kong, right? It's also
Szechuan restaurants.
Yeah, Szechuan restaurants. You got Northern Chinese. You've
Hai Di
got
Lao.
Korean. Yeah, you got Korean food that's getting so much better here. Japanese food that is very good. There's so much Malaysian and Singapore representation as well. I'm like,
They're good.
yeah, right. It's shockingly good compared to what I remember. First when I first moved here, did not exist.
How about, I ask because I'm part of the board of directors for EVR, which stands for and violence and racial and whatever against East and Southeast Asian communities. The sort of recent upsurge also came with the kind of COVID attacks, the attacks that's because of COVID. I mean, I've had friends who said that not so much that they've been attacked, but they've been sort of terrified, and being followed, all that, just for looking East Asian.
Yeah, I think that time, especially, I really heightened a lot of people's emotions. Really heightened a lot of people. It felt like almost for some people it was a almost like a validation. Yes, I can finally be racist. I'm coming out. And I actually follow this couple who owns this amazingly popular Santimbao place in Spitalfields, who had a terrible experience where they were just jogging and they were spat on during that time. So I think that I don't see. I either choose not to see it or I don't see it. I know it exists because every time certain people get an excuse to let out their true side, they choose to do so. And every time those moments happen, they do come out. So I know it's sad to know that for a fact that it still exists somewhere. But I do feel safe here. I do in London, right? I do feel like I'm also growing in London in ways that probably wouldn't have happened in Toronto. We talk a lot about Asian culture in London, but I also feel like London has a huge impact on me, right? The other way around, right? Western culture has a huge part of me, right? And as much as I like talking about, my Hong Kong roots, I also love talking about how Canada has impacted me, right? The way I talk, the way my humor, the way I process certain things is very Canadian. There's a lens that comes through, my family background in Hong Kong, but it's also heavily influenced by, how I grew up in Canada as well, right? And a lot of my interest came from there, right? So I'm wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs hat. I don't follow them as much now, but I watch a lot of hockey. I still watch a lot of basketball. I don't even follow football here in, in the UK. And I thought it was going to be the kiss of death, but not following a football team. But I turned out okay. So so I still carry a lot of my Canadianness as well, right? And I'm picking up a few things in London culture, right? Going to pubs, that's not a thing that is in either Canadian culture or Hong Kong culture. Bacon sandwiches are the best here, right? It's a sausage. It's like, come on, a fry up, a good Sunday roast. That's a very British thing. And what I've been learning, I suppose, is that it's a privilege to have seen so many cultures and have so many cultures as a part of you. But it also is a bit of a curse because you start missing all the things from all the different places that you had a chance to live in. I miss Hong Kong for its food, for its people. There's a vibe to it. There's nowhere else that has it. Same as Canada. And when I'm here in London, I'm like, well, I can't get either. And if I ever have the privilege to move somewhere else, I would also miss London, right? So
I went home. I meant Malaysia for a holiday in August. Couldn't believe it, but I was actually missing London. Because I think wherever you go, there are bits that kind of creep into you. Don't know why the thought of ivies came to my mind. It's like those roots that kind of hook on to you. And one of my guests, David Kam, he's also Malaysian like me, and we talked about, there's this specific term in Malay we call balik kampung. It's like, I think in Chinese we say fan hyong ha, but where would you go when you've been moving so much?
where is Herong Ha?
Where is home? And I sometimes I joke and I say, well, home is where I hang my hat, because I've got quite a few hats. That sort of a thing. But I think for more and more people, it's becoming that. But let's move on to what you do now. It's just the videos that you do. I'm like, you work with entrepreneurs.
I work with I can work with entrepreneurs. I work with business owners. I'm also work with companies who want to put their leadership in front of the camera so they can get content and get them more exposure and get their presence elevated in the industry. So anyone that really needs us to tell their story through video is who I work with. And I think that if there's one thing that my kind of funny background of being basically all over the Commonwealth has influences, is that I've learned how to listen very well and try to pick the story, because when you're moving from one culture to another, you're looking for something to relate to, right? You're constantly looking for something from the other culture that you can go, I understand what this is. That's my starting point. And so when I create content with other people and they're telling me their expertise and what they're trying to say, that's where my brain is going the same way, where I'm just listening and asking questions of why this is relatable and why this is interesting. And I think that's the helpful point for helping them not just talk to camera with confidence, but create a video that is easily relatable for the viewers as well.
I think one of the reasons why I want to ask is because apart from you, we get great sort of videoing entrepreneur and all that, I've been trying to get an entrepreneur, a Chinese entrepreneur, to come on a blog, podcast with me, and his sister said he's just shy. I said, why is he shy? Because he's successful. Do you think that's something? I don't know how many sort of East Asian Chinese people have you done this with. Do you think that that's something in the sort of East Asian culture that sort of do not want to put yourself in the limelight? And I find that sometimes it can be problematic, especially if you want to say, hey, look, tell your story because you were successful. You should be a role model. And they say, oh no, I'm never going to be that. Have you encountered that? And what do you think we can do to sort of encourage that? Although a lot of East and Southeast Asians have now come up and make more of their own stories.
I think it's particularly true when you're trying to do it in English, right? And to do it in a culture that you moved into, all right? And I agree with you. I think that our upbringing comes from a background of respecting elders, respecting the hierarchy. And a lot of times that comes with, we can't possibly be that good. We can't shout about ourselves, right? I think for me, I experienced that personally, right? And it's hard to almost deprogram that. And it's not about, trying to brag about yourself or over promote yourself. It's just to be visible, right? Because if you're not telling your story as it happens, you don't have to be a success, right? If you're not telling your story as it's happening, like we're doing right now, people don't know how to relate to you. People don't know how to look at you and go, oh, that's a person that has shared values with me, that has an interesting story that I relate to. But that's how friendships are made. That's how relationships are made. By creating content, you're giving more of an opportunity to create more relationships that way.
I think also it's all about representation. If people can see, themselves being there. I mean, one of the most, for me, sort of not interesting, but heartfelt podcast that I did was from a friend who did it anonymously because obviously, she's Vietnamese and she was part of the boat people, which was in her mother's tummy, and then she went to Hong Kong, and then she was like a single mother, and then she was divorced, and that kind of story that doesn't always get told, that is so, for me, so kind of meaningful, because these are real people. This happens to our people as well. And we need to kind of like highlight those so that other people would come out and say, oh, that story was so interesting. I want to tell my story as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's important to, I think, understand the impact it can have, but also not to do it because of that, right?
No.
Because if you if you're getting out there trying to elevate your presence, because you're trying to create representation, then it's less about that. That's a benefit, right? That is 100% a benefit. But to just even do your own self-justice, so that you're able to connect your story with other people, I think is incredibly important.
I say that also because as a disabled person, I for a long time have been very reluctant to go. I think it's a combination of being disabled and being East Asian, so you don't really want it. But I kind of like push myself because I realized that if I don't do that, people, you know, it's again, it's that representation, isn't it? And I still don't like it. But but I want to know, where are you going, you think, in the next few years? Do you have a kind of plan, sort of, your aim, to get to be the next millionaire or whatever,
Well, no, my aim has never been money. Money comes for me as a result of happiness, as a result of being helpful to others. That's how I feel, right? So the goal has always been to be happy. The goal is for my family to be happy. And the goal is for us to, as individual, as collective, with my friends, people I know, spread as much joy as possible before our time is done on Earth, right? So, I would love to make more money.
You would?
But yeah, that would be nice. You can get more fried rice that way. But it's not the end goal. It's not something that I am willing to do anything for, because ultimately I want to be positive. I want to uplift people. And let's hope I can make a living on the way. So,
and you make a good living.
I think if you're talking about goals, right, where I'm going next, first and foremost, we'll be in London. The family's thriving in the city, so I'm not gonna take them away from that. What comes next, I don't know. I know that I really like working for myself, and I want to make that a success. I want to know that I'm helping other people doing the same through content and through videos. And that's really the goal.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. It's not bored at all.
That's the highest compliment I've heard.
No, because at the beginning I was saying that I think I've ADHD. In fact, I'm sure I have. And, I sometimes can barely sit still through things. So, but that was brilliant. So thank you so much for being here, and you're a joy.
Oh, thank you, Aldor.
Thank you.